All right, everybody. What we have here is a student essay, and I'm going to go through it and kind of critique it, but also show what's going on well here so that you can use that information to have a better idea of what I'm looking for when I'm grading your essay. So, what we have here is a standard interpretive essay on a book. In this case, it's on the Los Angeles noir novel, The Big Sleep. Now, most of you probably haven't read The Big Sleep, but we should have a good enough introduction if Susie Student, obviously this is a made up name, did her job by introducing the novel and what we need to know to us in her introduction. But either way, from what I remember, she came up with her own approach, so this isn't responding to a prompt. And we can just see the basic structure of the essay and see what you should be doing and what you should be careful about. So let's even just start off here. What we have here is proper MLA format heading. It's on the left. It's all double spaced. She put her name, then she put my name, then she put the name of the class. This was the Los Angeles Noir class that I used to teach, and the date. You can see it's from a little while ago. So this is all good. And then we have here the title. Now, sometimes I like titles like this. This is actually closer to the type of title you'd see in a college paper or a scholarly paper where they'll give some kind of title, instinct versus rationality, and then they'll say what they're doing, the portrayal of the id, ego, and superego in The Big Sleep. Now, what this means, I'll get to in a moment. But we have this title. It's informative. If it's just this, it can be fun, but I like the fact that now we know what we're going to look at. If you were looking for actual articles written by professors and stuff like that, stuff that had been published, this is very helpful. The subtitle, which is what this is, because now you know what this is kind of going to talk about. And I know already too. That's good. All right, let's read it. For every person, there's a constant struggle between basic desire and logic, and is up to individual, that should be, it's up to the individual, which guiding force to follow. This is okay. It's a general opening strategy of talking about a truth about humanity in general, which is fine. It's not really snagging us and making us go, whoa, but it's all right. And now she's going to bring in the actual work. In the novel, The Big Sleep by Raymond Chandler, private detective Philip Marlowe is hired to investigate the blackmail of Carmen Sternwood. As he works to discover the truth, Marlowe uncovers crimes far beyond what he expected. He encounters a variety of characters with different degrees of morality, each of whom exist within a specific level of consciousness. Okay, a couple things. Right here we have the struggle between basic desire and logic at the beginning. Then we jump right into the talking about the summary of the book with no transition here. What does this have to do with this idea? In the end, this idea, this hook is just hanging out there, and we're like, I guess that was important. I don't know. So that needs to be more clearly connected. The summary itself is good. This idea, each of these characters exist within a specific level of consciousness, is a kind of confusing. I don't know 100% what she means there. It sounds cool, but what does it mean? I kind of know what it means because I've read her thesis already, but this is what she says. Now we get into the thesis. So this was all introductory summary. Throughout the novel, Chandler utilizes the characters Carmen, Oles, and Marlowe to represent the id, superego, and ego, thus demonstrating the different moralities of man as he struggles between instinct and rationality. Okay, now number one, we brought back instinct and rationality up here. Or kind of desire and logic. But it could have been a clearer thread throughout the whole paragraph. Now, some of you might be going, what's this mean? Id, superego, and ego. This goes back to Freud's theories about the subconscious. Mostly that we're all made up, and this is your dime store explanation of what this means, but that we're all made up of an id, superego, and ego. The id, or let's start with the ego, is kind of our conscious self, our understanding of ourself. The superego is the part of us that leads us towards to do good moral things. It leads us to do, to want to live up to ideals and stuff like that. And the id is like our basic animalistic self that runs off of pure desire and stuff like that. So she's saying that these characters can be shown to represent these things, which is an interesting idea. Thus demonstrating the different moralities of man as he, I think it just means man in general, struggles between instinct and rationality. It's a good idea. I like it all. This part of connecting their representation to this demonstration could be, a little bit more explained. I'm kind of nitpicking here, but I want the ideas to flow so that we obviously understand where she's going. But in general, good thesis, very interesting idea, but we could have the thematic topic of instinct and rationality flow through the summary a bit more. But here we go. So hopefully that makes you understand. We're reading this story about a private detective, and in that story we have characters that represent these different levels of human consciousness. That's what she sees here with specific level of consciousness. I don't know if I'd say they exist within a level of consciousness as much as each of whom represent a specific level of consciousness. Might be better. All right, let's go. So we have our thesis. We know what we want to learn. That's what I do when I'm grading your paper. I go, okay, this is what you're going to say. Let's see if you follow it through. So the first thing I kind of expect she's going to say is that Carmen represents the id. Let's look. Chandler's use of animalistic imagery to describe Carmen portrays her as the id. Okay, that's good. And demonstrates how her lack of morality is caused by her choice to follow her instincts rather than rational thought. By the way, one thing goes without saying. The only reason I'm able to read this is because I know what the id is. If I didn't, this would be very confusing. She should have introduced this idea in the introduction so we knew what was going on. But anyway, let's keep going. Chandler's use of animalistic imagery to describe Carmen portrays her as the id and demonstrates how her lack of morality is caused by her choice to follow her instincts rather than rational thought. I like this topic sentence. It's clear about the representation. This character, Carmen, is the id, and it connects it to her theme pretty smoothly, I'd say, of this instinct of this theme about instinct and rationality. I think it's all there. I think this is a good topic sentence. Let's keep going. When Carmen is first introduced, she attempts to seduce Marlowe. He describes how she smiled with her mouth and she had little sharp predatory teeth, as white as fresh orange pith and as shiny as porcelain. Carmen's description as being predatory is a direct link to her animal side. Oh, that's good. All right, that makes sense to us all. Like an animal, she is driven by base instincts such as lust and thus fulfills the roles of the id. Her actions are disorganized and she has little care for the consequences of her actions, much like a predator would. This is good, but starting to lose a little bit of connection to what we had in the quote. But these two lines of analysis are very nicely focused on the content of this quote, this fact of her being predatory. If I was her, I would talk about how she's got little sharp teeth, like an animal. That's what I would do. By the way, if I was her, I would have put Chandler, because it's by Raymond Chandler, 5. Do that the first time you quote. If it's all the same book throughout the whole thing, you can lose Chandler and just put the page number, but I would have put it at the beginning. Also, I don't think she needs this ellipses. I know she's starting mid-quote, but that's fine. I don't think you need to put this at the beginning of every quote. Put it there if you're skipping stuff in between. All right. Let's keep going. We left off here. Later, Marlowe describes Carmen as he attempts to kill him. It should be as she attempts to kill him. But, that's just a little typo. Describes Carmen as what? Could have put that there and it would have been good. Describes Carmen animalistically again at the moment when she attempts to kill him. Quote, the hissing sound grew louder and her face had the scraped bone look, aged, deteriorated, become animal, and not a nice animal. Again, Carmen is being compared to an animal, both using the direct phrase become animal and by describing her as hissing, a motif present throughout the novel. She's acting on her primal instincts without regard for the morality of her actions. Yeah, how does morality come into this quote? This writer is great at saying some specific things about the quote, how it connects to this idea of her being animalistic. This gets a little bit more disconnected from the specific evidence. I would have liked more specific discussion of this evidence. Carmen's mind is reduced to the id, and as a result, she loses her sense of rationality and becomes immoral. Feels a little floating and disconnected. I guess it's coming out of this idea of her acting on her primal instincts. But this thematic connection, which is good, she connects to the theme, could be a little bit more smoothly worked into, but it's still pretty good. I think she's doing so far. I think this essay is quite good, but there are things I can point out for improvement. As an officer of the law, Oles represents the superego. Yeah, I guess it's okay. It doesn't have much of a transition going into the beginning of this. Sometimes I'm okay with that, but it might feel a little awkward to you if you're reading it. It just starts off, as an officer of the law, you're like, what? As an officer of the law, Oles represents, that's his name, Oles, he's a cop. Oles represents the superego, and his dedication to the morals of society shows the prevalence of rationality over instinct. Oles is first introduced in the beginning of the novel when Marlowe describes him as, she doesn't need this comma or these ellipses, by the way. Go away. As, quote, the DA's chief investigator who had given me the lead to General Sternwood. So what if you haven't read it, this guy is a cop that told the private detective Marlowe to go talk to this guy, General Sternwood. That's what's going on here. Page number. By the way, I would like Chandler in there, but otherwise it's very good MLA format. All right, what's she going to say about this? We have this quote that doesn't seem like it has that much content in it, and it's supposed to support the idea that he's the superego. He's dedicated to the morals of society. Let's see. Oles is the guiding moral force for Marlowe. His position within the police force gives him a sense of right and wrong, and he is driven by a sense of duty. As a result, he fulfills the role of the superego. I would have liked if she said, as a result, like his dedication to right and wrong is what makes him a fulfillment of the superego, or maybe even work this into this discussion here. But I'll tell you what, this is great. This is all true. It doesn't talk much about this quote up here. There's not much content here. Even if she mentioned, the fact that he led Marlowe to help General Sternwood and do something morally good, helps show that. And that's here within that quote. She could have talked about that. She talks about him being the guiding force for Marlowe, but we don't see that in the quote. So this analysis, which is interesting and good, is not connected to the evidence. That's not good. So that needs to be fixed. When Marlowe calls Oles after Joe Brody is killed, this is stuff you don't know about, but anyway, Oles says, quote, look out the window and you'll see me coming around the corner. I thought you acted a little cagey on that one. So Marlowe calls a cop who says, we just had a murder. He's like, I figured something was happening. I'm already on my way. So once again, Oles is a source of morality for Marlowe. When Marlowe begins to struggle with his own morals, he calls Oles, who as the superego functions as Marlowe's consciousness. In addition, Oles is already on his way to meet Marlowe, his friend. Rather than trust his instinct and assume nothing is awry, he thinks rationally and suspects Marlowe, further proving his role as the superego and, as a result, his strong sense of morality. By the way, he's not trusting his instincts. That connects it back to the theme. So this actually has a decent thematic connection, even though you might not see it at first. I think this is pretty good. she's really trying to tackle on this little quote and all those ways that show it. So, I like this. And everything she said up here was good too. It just wasn't that connected to the evidence. So far, so good. I mean, there are flaws, but a flawed paper doesn't mean like, oh my gosh, throw it out the window. We all have little flaws, but I think that there's a lot of great stuff going on here. Last body paragraph. Through his narration of the novel and struggle to uphold his morals, Marlowe fulfills the role of the ego and serves as a balance between instinct and rationality. After solving the blackmail of Carmen, Marlowe, by the way, let's stop. Through his narration of the novel and struggle to uphold his own morals, Marlowe fulfills the role of the ego and serves as a balance between instinct and rationality. That's a pretty solid topic sentence. Talks about how he is the ego. And connects it to theme. She's doing really pretty good topic sentences. After solving the blackmail of Carmen, Marlowe closes the case, but is still left with unanswered questions. He describes how, quote, I'm not a big fan of the way this is worked in here. The smart thing for me to do was to take another drink and forget the whole mess. That being the obviously smart thing to do, I called Eddie Mars and told him I was coming down to Los Alindis that evening to talk to him. By choosing to put himself in danger by continuing to pursue the truth, Marlowe is acting irrationally. Yet he acknowledges the logical choice, but ultimately follows his instinct, and by doing so, acts in a way that he believes is moral. This conscious decision sets him apart as the ego and gives him a sense of self-separation, maybe, from both the animalistic ID and the rational superego. It's interesting. So what's happening here, because I need to explain it a little bit. This guy, Philip Marlowe, the main character, is kind of done with his job. And he says, okay, the smart thing for me to do would be to, just rest, forget the whole mess. But instead I went and even, there's loose ends that he has to go tie up, and he goes and does it even though it's kind of against his best self-interest. And she's saying that that's irrational to act against your best self-interest, even though it is the right thing to do. So he's making conscious choices. He's weighing the rational, and he's kind of ignoring that, but he's not going through desire. He's acting through morality. I understand this part of the book because I've read the book, and she's doing a good job of explaining it. So I actually think this is good. Later, when discussing the case with General Sternwood, Marlowe describes his approach to his work. Quote, I do it my way. I do my best to protect you, and I may break a few rules, but I break them in your favor. Once again, Marlowe's acting on his own sense of morality, despite society's own ethical views. He is guided by both instinct and rationality and acts in each case as he deems morally right. Marlowe forgets his own identity and way of thinking, allowing him to fully embody the id. Now, this is a problem. He is supposed to be the ego. So I don't know what's going on here. I think she just made a mistake. I think she is supposed to put ego. So that would make you go, what? But, it's not. We know it was a mistake. So these are the body paragraphs. They did a great job, actually, of staying very laser focused on everything she said in the thesis. So that's a big win. And I would say that the analysis that she had good quotes throughout all of these. Well, this one about Oles is very plain. It's not the greatest quote. She could have used it better. But for the most part, all these quotes are really good. And the analysis is quite thoughtful and most of the time very focused on the textual evidence. So I think that so far, and really we're coming to the very end of the essay, I think it's very good. Let's look at the conclusion just to finish off. So what do we want at the conclusion? We're looking for a restated thesis. In The Big Sleep, the struggle between instinct and rationality is shown by the portrayals of Carmen, Oles, and Marlowe as each level of consciousness. Let's struggle between instinct. Yeah. I think it's pretty good. It doesn't need to list superego, ego, and id, because this is a tie-up restatement of the thesis. Carmen's animal instinct and irrationality is symbolic of the id. In contrast, Olds serves as the superego, acting as the guiding moral force in the novel. Marlowe mediates between the two, and as the ego, follows both instinct and rational thought. Oh, I like the way she said that there. Ultimately, the conflict between the different levels of consciousness determines each individual's morality, demonstrating the effect one's mindset has on his or her life as a whole. This is okay. It could have been a little bit longer. This is a short conclusion, but not bad. She's using what I sometimes say is a decent way to format a conclusion of restating the thesis, then restating each subclaim or each topic sentence, which is what she does. But, it's not bad. We definitely come out of it going, okay, yeah, that was the conclusion. That's what we knew the argument was about. Well focused. Could have a little bit more reflection at the end, but you don't want to go too crazy. What would I give this? I would give this essay an A. I thought it was quite good. I thought there were some issues, and you saw me point them out, but I kind of thought it was an enjoyable, thoughtful essay with really focused analysis. So this would be something in the territory of what you're aiming for. This was just a 5-paragraph essay, 2 quotes per paragraph, following an interpretive thesis. So I hope that helps you conceptualize and think about what you'd want to look for in an essay.